Wow, 116 failed attempts later, I'm still here trying to get through the intro. But let's just forget that. And do you actually want to know the easiest way to find a super solid phone with great value? Just take a look at the specs, and the moment you see a Snapdragon 625, yes, and you all know I'm a 625 fanboy, boom, you're done. It's over. Of course, it's not always that easy, but actually, in the case of the Nubia Z11 Mini S, it is, and my preview has already proven this quite well. But of course, since we are here in the full review, I want to take a little bit more time to talk about all the good stuff, but also possibly bad stuff. So let's just continue and talk about the design and build. I'm definitely not gonna complain about the build because it feels super solid. It doesn't creak at all. The buttons have a nice tactile and clicky feedback, and they even managed to make the metal feel less slippery than on some other phones. Design also super nice as well because nicely rounded off here, it feels very comfortable in the hand. And if I would have to complain just about one thing, it's the fact that I think it could have been a little bit more compact. Because comparing here with the Samsung Galaxy 7, 0.1 inches smaller, and since it is a flagship, a little bit more compact just because of that already, you will see it's noticeably taller and also wider. And I have short fingers, so that's mostly a complaint of mine, but one-hand usability was a little bit harder for me, same as also reaching the quite high up top fingerprint reader. If you have normal sized fingers though, not a problem at all, but still I have to say it feels a little bit wider than some other 5.2 inches. One thing that is great to see though is that they improved the fingerprint reader over the Mini, because it reacts just a little bit better now. You don't have to press so much. It is also faster and more reliable, so quite nice here. We also have a slight little 2.5D glass here, so it feels curved. So in terms of design and build, still very nicely done after all. We have the protruding camera here along with the LED. Microphone and headphone jack at the top. On the left side, the SD card and SIM card tray. On the bottom, USB Type-C, the speaker on the right and the microphone on the left. With the buttons, as already mentioned, nicely done in terms of build and the design. They are also placed really good and they are easy to reach, great. No notification LED, but therefore brief light, because what this does is glow when you get a notification, but it's a little bit faint and not that easy to see at the daylight, along with two flanking capacitive buttons. The bezels, or at least the device on its own, like I said, could have been a little bit more narrow. Other than that though, no complaints here at all, and that's why I would already like to go to the display. Let's get into one thing that I want to show off is the screen display preferences. What I've wished for already on my last review of a Nubia device is a little bit more granular control when it comes to the hue, so switching it from warm to cool. And we only had 3 options, but now as you can see, this is an actual slider that allows us to set it exactly the way we want it, and that's why the white is great. Of course, we can also change the saturation from glow natural to standard, which is also nice to see. So what about this actual quality? In terms of maximum brightness, they also improved it now with 390 lux. It is a little bit brighter, easier at sunlight, but still I would say just about good. Like I said, the white point is great, the black also absolutely fine. Viewing angles, still absolutely fine, even though it doesn't look so much here on the screen. I have to say, I really like the calibration and the clarity and just the overall quality of display. So nothing to complain here. It is still a top, not quite flagship, but still very good, especially for a mid-ranger display. Now, let's talk about the sound and the speaker here. The speaker might not be spectacular, but it is still solid enough. Maximum volume could have been a little bit higher, but in most cases it's still fine. And one thing that I still like to say is that it sounds very nicely balanced, so not thin or weak, that is important. So it still is a good speaker. Headphone jack is good, what actually means more for a headphone jack, because being above average is quite hard these days, because still many phones don't really give a lot about that, and it is better. We have also a DTS option, which works if you have the headphones included or plugged in, but all it allows you is to change the treble and the bass, and I would actually recommend you just turn it off, because the clarity, quality and overall volume was just better without it. But just so you know that. Now let's talk about the performance now. Let me quickly kill off all the apps. And you have to long press to get there. This is something that I'm still not the biggest fan of. But let's launch a few apps and let's see how quickly they start up. As you can see, definitely quite okay in terms of speed. It feels overall not super snappy, but definitely snappy enough. So no complaints here at all. If we talk about the performance in the browser, absolutely nice, because the rendering times are fine. And I've not for no reason, or I have praised it for good reason. The Snapdragon 625 performs just great. Browsing is great, super smooth, pretty much no lag, and the same is also the case here for all the apps, because as you can see, it's of course not quite as smooth as a flagship, but super nice, consistent, pretty much no lag. It really knows to deliver, and we have 4 GB of RAM here, so the multitasking is pretty much one of the strongest when it comes to a 625. And yeah, I just can't say anything bad about it. It is a great performer. You can quickly switch between all those apps, so all is top here. I can't say anything else but that the 625 is a great mid-range SoC that actually performs very close to flagships already. And the same actually is the case also for games, because you can play quite easy with moderate frame rates, about 30 frames, without any issues. Even more demanding, higher task games work absolutely without any issues. So what else should I say besides the fact that this is good for all the games, and since we have the very efficient Snapdragon 625, we don't have any heating issues and so on, and you can play for hours and hours. Why? Because the battery is so good, and I want to talk about that now. A full charge from 5 to 100% takes about 2 hours and 25 with the stock charger that has only 1.5 amps. So I think if you use an actual a little bit more amped charger, it could even charge below 2 hours, but that's something I'm not 100% sure of. Didn't get the time to try that. If we are talking about YouTube, 8% per hour, absolutely nice value, one of the amongst the best ones. Now, if you check my batteries estimates, I have to say take that with a little bit of caution, because I've noticed since the last 3 or 4 months that the difference between what I've usually seen of mobile data and mixed use and also Wi-Fi has widened apart. I'm not quite 100% sure, because 5.5 hours doesn't sound so great anymore, but if you see 8 hours to even 9 hours on Wi-Fi, this is still excellent. So everyone else should even get more, because I used 50%, which is already quite bright, and if you use maybe automatic, it should be even better. So like I said, 5.5 is still very good, so don't get me wrong. But I think that has something to do more than me. That's why you should maybe take more closer look at the mixed values and also maybe the Wi-Fi only use, because the standby rate, especially on Wi-Fi, was super excellent and even quite good on mobile data. That's pretty much all around. So let's talk about the software. The launcher here, it is the stock one. As you can see, no app drawer. That's why I'm not a big fan of it already. One thing that I also don't like so much, we have to actually long press to get to the recent apps. This just takes a little bit longer. And I don't get quite the fact that if we go, for example, here in the options and check for features, see the custom button key. We already have the option to change that from menu to back, but we don't have an option to set this to the recent apps button. I don't know why that is the case. In terms of quick settings, definitely quite nice. The second swipe gives you all of them and you can customize it, so really great. I like the UI personally a lot, and since we're already talking about some features here, we have screen split up. So even though we don't have Nougat, we already can use 2 apps side by side, which is also great. But one thing that I want to get into now is the following. I had gotten complaints from someone who said that someone tested it, a reviewer, and a deal breaker for him was the following: 1 touch point, 2 touch points, but no third touch point. So he said it only is a 2-touch device. But I think this person doesn't really know what he's talking about, because if he would just go into touch gestures and turn off, for example, this free finger swipe gesture, so no free finger gestures are enabled anymore, and go back, you would see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6 and so on. So I've tried it, all 10 are there. So before you make such claims, check what you are talking about. The same goes actually for one thing as well, because we have those edge gestures, as you can see here, which we can swipe through the apps and so on. And the person said on the sides you can't access the screen so much. So if you have that problem, which I personally didn't run into, just turn off the edge gestures, because if you can see those, you have the options to swipe between apps repeatedly, also from the bottom, and the double click. So in case you want to use them, just expect maybe not to get all the responsiveness towards the screen, but that is what I wanted to just mention when it comes to the software, because we have nice features and it is very capable. We can adjust the display, the audio, and so on, and that's why I think still this is one of the best UIs on the market. It looks sleek. Yes, I have to just point out it's still running on Marshmallow, so it's not Nougat, but I don't think it would have changed on Nougat, because I know Nougat, and you don't really get anything you wouldn't see here, because we have dual apps already, the optimization is great. So I would say don't really bother too much not having Nougat here, because it feels like Nougat. And if you wouldn't have the version number in the screen, you wouldn't really care. So of course, Nougat, a lot of people want it, but I don't think it will come anytime soon, because I don't think they think it's necessary. But this is just what I wanted to say about that. So let's talk about the camera here. Selfies first. I think they look great, because as you can see here, very nice and sharp, especially here. This looks really great. Absolutely no complaints here at all. Great colors. They look very natural. And even here, it managed not to overexpose my face, which is great to see. A lot of details here as well. Great colors, very nice contrast, very nice saturation. So I think it's definitely a top selfie cam, especially here, even in not artificial light, it does a top job. Absolutely no complaints, really good. Here a picture with the flash, here one without, and even without this you can see quite bright and maintains very sharp without much grain. Maybe not the very best camera for low light pics and artificial light, but as you can see, mostly very sharp and not grainy at all. I think it still knows absolutely to deliver. Now, if we are talking about pictures outside, I just have to say one thing. As you can see, some macros here look quite nice, but I had quite a hard time to actually achieve those, because the focus, the autofocus with macros was very flaky, so not really reliable. So you will have to make multiple shots to get a great one. Sometimes it overexposes it well, but this is something that I wasn't all that fond of, because as you can see, the quality is absolutely there. It can produce great pictures with nice depth of field, super nice sharpness, great quality overall, very sharp, colors look very natural, and the balance is great. So it's just the autofocus, because once you see here a little bit more of landscape photos, this looks way better. So it is definitely a great one. This now is 4K. And for me, the picture seems a little bit nervous. As you can see, there is some kind of jittery edges, but it feels smooth. It looks nice. Of course, a few artifacts are visible. So it's not a perfect 4K camera just because of the artifacting and so on. It could have sometimes been a little bit better. And this was an accident. Sorry. Yeah. And you can actually already hear the sound, but not much has happened here. So let's switch to 1080p 60 frames. This is much smoother, but you will also see that this looks noticeably not that detailed, not that great anymore. Of course, 60 frames, nice here. And it still maintains to quite have a nice picture, but yeah, this is pretty much all I want to say about that. So I would actually say let's already get to the pros and cons. And let me quickly just stop the video because it's confused, but I'm not gonna start over once again. So let's just go to the pros and cons here. High build quality, absolutely nicely done. The fingerprint reader has been improved over the Z11 Mini. We have a very good display. It's still not quite a flagship level, but it's a 100% super satisfying, and for this price range, really nice. The speakers are maybe just good, but at least good. And it's just one. Actually, we have no temperature issues. Excellent battery life, despite everything that I've said. Just said, like, yeah, you know what. Great software in my opinion. A very good selfie cam, and at least a potentially very good main cam. Like I said, just the autofocus, and then still top value. Now, what's not that great? First of all, the fingerprint reader, as I said, is a little bit placed too high for me. It could have been maybe a little bit more narrow as well. We have no option to make a recent apps button out of this menu button, which is very sad to see because you don't really use the menu button a lot anymore these days. The apparently two-finger touch, but I've said and I've explained why this is not really the case. We are only still on Android 6.0.1. Not a whole issue, big one. I've said why. And like I said, the one issue about the camera is that it's a little bit unreliable on macros. Now, let's talk about if this is a good phone or not. About $300, and what do you get for that? You get 64 gigabytes with 4 gigabytes of RAM. So what's comparable here? Of course, I have to call out the Moto G5 Plus, which could potentially have a little bit of a better camera, but you will get 1 gigabyte RAM less and 32 gigabytes of storage left. Or less, so you won't really get quite the value out of that. And in terms of build, I don't think it can be any better. Fingerprint reader will be just maybe as good. The display here is top, the speaker is top, performance is top, and the battery life is top. And since the G5 Plus is pretty much the same specs, it will be about on that. So in terms of value, this is better. Where the Moto has the upper hand is that it's a Moto, so it's way more known. That is a little bit of an issue here for the Nubia. It's just not that much of a known brand. And then I have to also call out one phone, which especially on flash sales is pretty much the hardest competitor this one has, and that is the Honor 8, because quite often available for $300, it is still closer towards a flagship than the Nubia Z11 Mini S. It has the better camera, the display is debatable, it is a little bit more compact, the speaker is louder, the battery life is not quite as good, and the performance is, I would say, actually very comparable, maybe just a little bit better in games. So you have to decide which one you prefer a little bit more. I have to say this, if you want a little bit better battery life, or actually noticeably better battery life, is the one to go for. But of course, like I said, it's still more of a mid-ranger, even though premium mid-ranger, but for $300 you can't really go wrong. And I know a lot of people will rather tend towards the Moto G5 Plus because it has already Nougat and it is a reputable brand. This just has the issue not being all that known, which is actually like a little bit sad to hear, but it is what it is. And that's where I'm going to leave it. So I hope you liked the review. Give it a thumbs up. Leave anything down there below and maybe leave a subscription. But other than that, I'm happy that I got through it after 116 takes. And that was woo. Until next time. Bye.